have one.
Yeah,
We
you
have one
do
shade
that
hanging
at
all
work.
around the sky.
Not at work at the moment, does it?
Make you one, but sometimes hang up on more than...
Try being in
I
healthcare.
bought a
Well, imagine.
2 weeks ago.
You can never get enough.
You're right.
Piston
You haven't gone to the masks yet.
everything like that. Fantastic. Oh,
They're
All right,
at the
we'll
moment.
start.
about 4 meetings.
Hey?
Councillors, please be attentive. We are starting now. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Ordinary Council meeting tonight. I'll refer to our agenda and start with acknowledgement. We, the Greater Shepparton City Council, begin today's meeting by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land, which now comprises Greater Shepparton. We pay respect to their tribal elders, we celebrate their continuing culture, and we acknowledge the memory of their ancestors. Privacy notice. This public meeting is being streamed live via our Facebook page and made available for public access on our website, along with the official minutes of this meeting. All care is taken to maintain your privacy. However, as a visitor in the public gallery, it is assumed that your consent is given in the event that your image is broadcast to the public. It is also assumed that your consent is given to the use and disclosure of any information that you share at the meeting, including personal or sensitive information, to any person who accesses those recordings or minutes. Apologies. Councillors, do we have any apologies tonight? Councillor Bruce
yes, we have an
Giovanetti. Yeah.
Apology for Councillor Bruce Giovanetti. Apologise for him and grant him leave, please.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second the motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Any declaration of conflict of interest with respect to tonight's agenda? Meeting agenda? No? Thank you. Item number 5 is about confirmation of minutes of previous meetings on page number 1. Would a councillor please move a motion?
I'll move a motion, Madam Mayor, that the minutes of the 18th of February 2020 and 31st of March 2020 Ordinary Council meetings as circulated be confirmed.
Do we have a seconder?
I'll second that motion, Madam Mayor.
Those in favour? Carried unopposed. Before I start other formal proceedings of this meeting, I would quickly like to make some acknowledgements on behalf of councillors. I would like to thank our CEO, Mr. Peter Harriet, Council's executive leadership team and Council staff for their diligence, hard work and sense of duty in responding to the COVID-19 emergency in a very agile and professional manner. And also during this time, they have been working hard to ensure the continuity of business as usual in these unusual times and to deliver council services to our community. So thank you so much for your contributions. We just wanted to make that acknowledgement, and it's much appreciated. Thank you. Item number 6 is public question time. Do we have any public?
We do not, Madam
We do
Mayor.
not receive any.
No questions.
Gather my thoughts.
Okay. Moving on to page number 2, item number 7. Councillors, there's a recommendation on page number 2, item 7.1, draft Kangapna Recreation Reserve. Yes, the recommendation is on page 3. Thank you. The recommendation on page 3 with regards to item 7.1, draft Kangapna Recreation Reserve Master Plan. Would a councillor like to move a motion?
I'll move the recommendation, Madam Mayor, contained on page 3, that the council release the draft Kangapna Recreation Reserve Master Plan for public exhibition from the 22nd of April to the 22nd of May of 2020.
Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second that.
Madam Mayor, I'll second that.
Councillor Kim O'Keefe, thank you.
Oh, my lips moved, did you?
Councillor Oraswari, would you like to speak to your motion?
Very briefly, Madam Mayor, thank you. It's self-explanatory. Essentially, this is a strategic document for the Kingupna Recreation Reserve, and we're putting it out in draft form. We're seeking at-large community input going forward in relation to the various components that make up that draft plan, and we're putting it out for a 1-month period for submissions, which is a legislative requirement, and everything else will flow from that consultation period.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oraswari. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, just to also thank, obviously, the people that have contributed to this. It is in draft form, so still open to the public. That included the Kingupna Recreational Reserve user group, so thank you to them for their input to this document, council groups, face-to-face discussions, workshops, on-phone conversations. So obviously there's lots of work gone into this. We do see that the detailed background report also has some recommendations there, being some things listed in our agenda: heating and cooling in the community hall, toilet upgrades and compliance in the community hall, football change rooms, electronic scoreboard, new community change room, clubroom facility, and the Oval and Netball court lighting. So, as we said, it's a draft, and it'll be going out between the 22nd of April to the 22nd of May 2020.
Thank you very much, Councillor O'Keefe. Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? Would a councillor like to speak for the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor, and fully supportive of the overall plan for Kingupna. I'm just mindful, though, that the timing of this going out for public consultation, many of the users, community groups, the clubs, etc., may find it difficult to adequately consider this, in that they won't be able to hold meetings themselves. And I hope that at the end of the process, and at the 22nd of May, that we look at the responses from the community in that light. That did we give everybody an opportunity to respond? And if we need to be fairly generous in that assessment, I think, and there is a potential that we might be looking for, from my perspective, perhaps an extended advertising period when things are a little bit different.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelman. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion?
Yes. Yes, Madam Mayor, it's basically a continuation of what Councillor Hazelman said. We could extend it, but I don't think that'll serve the purpose any better, because we still will have the same circumstances. But I'm sure Council will be in a position, if we note that there isn't the people putting replies in and having their input they normally would, especially clubs, etc., and organisations, we cater for that and allow them to have some time so they can get themselves together. In these difficult times, it's hard enough. We can see the work a council has to go to get a gathering together, let alone a small community club like a netball club or a football club or a recreation reserve committee. It'd be very difficult for them. So if there is any issues at all with them getting together, I'm sure we'd look at extending the time and allowing for that input.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Next item is 7.2, signing of leases. There's a recommendation on page 6. Would a councillor like to move a motion?
Madam Mayor, I'll move that motion on page, or recommendation, sorry, on page 6. I won't read it out, there's quite a bit there. It's basically us signing and re-signing leases that have existed for a period of time.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Oraswari.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Adam, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. I don't think this needs a lot of discussion. It's pretty straightforward. These are the leases that have been advertised under Section 223 of the Local Government Act. No submissions have been received regarding these leases, and therefore it is now appropriate that they be signed. Some of these leases have expired and some are up for expiration very shortly, so it's just a procedural matter.
Thank you. Councillor Oraswari, would you like to speak?
That's me. No thanks, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? Would a councillor like to speak to the motion? Okay, we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Moving on to next agenda item, item 7.3, contract 1897, North Growth Corridor Drainage and Pump Station. There's a recommendation on page 9. Could a councillor please move a motion?
I'll move the recommendation, Madam Mayor, on page 9. It comes in two parts. The council accept the tender submitted by Mawson Construction. Contract 1897, construction of North Growth Corridor Pump and Basin upgrade for the lump sum price of $1,316,895.93, inclusive of GST, and secondly, authorise the Chief Executive Officer to sign and seal the contractual documents.
Thank you, Councillor Oswari. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Patterson. Thank you. Councillor Oswari, would you like to speak to the motion?
Oh, thanks, Madam Mayor. Look, it's effectively speaks for itself. It's a $1.3 million infrastructure project. I'm familiar with that area up there, and it does need it's got the bones there, but it needs an upgrade with a pump station, etc., to manage any floods that we have in the future, and that's been there for a while, and it's sorely in need of development.
Thank you. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just quickly, we all know Mawson's a very good local contractor, and I'm more than happy with the work that performed for council. The interesting thing I noticed in this is there appears to be 3 new tenderers in the game, and I haven't seen these names come up before. I could be wrong, often am, but that will be great for us moving forward. More opposition, more people, more competitive tendering is always a good thing for the ratepayers. So, there's some hard times ahead for us all, and it'll be interesting to see where that goes in the future.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Would anyone like to speak against the motion? Would a councillor like to speak for the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hazelman?
More about the process than anything else. Not that long ago, we had a contract that came up here. I know Councillor Giovanetti raised an issue about it, that the contractor missed out because of a relatively minor mistake in the contract documentation. And yet I notice in the report here that the winning contractor's tender was varied by the staff as a result of recognising that there was a minor error. I'm sure Councillor Giovanetti would have jumped all over this tonight if he was here. Look, I understand how these things can happen. It's purely an administrative mistake. But when you see it happen and there's a different outcome from one to the other, it doesn't read all that well.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelman. Would a councillor like to speak to the motion? Okay, we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Next item on the agenda is 7.4, our Sporting Future Funding Round 2, 2019-2020. There's a recommendation on page 13. Would a councillor like to move a motion?
I'm happy to move that motion, Madam Mayor. That the council approve the recommendation of the assessment panel and subsequent funding for the following Our Sporting Future 2019-2020 Round 2 projects.
As per the table below.
Sorry, and what's the
Yeah.
below?
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Oswari.
I'll second the recommendation, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. It's great to see that we have a range of different sporting communities that are actually looking at funding from minor category, sports aid category to major category. This really ensures that we can support, our sporting community and make sure that their facilities are up to speed, they have the things that they do need. So it's great to see, that these, eventually when they do get back to their sport, that it'll be hopefully, things will be bigger and better for them with this type of funding and support from council.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Oswari, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. The other interesting aspect of this is that the items that are the subject of the various grants involve infrastructure upgrades. And when this unfortunate business of COVID-19 has come to an end, there will be people in the community looking for some work, and these sort of projects will provide some form of additional income on the recovery phase. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? Would a councillor like to speak for the motion?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. Just,
Australia?
I just want to take special note of the Admona Football Netball Club. It's not a lot of money they're receiving, to $2,700, but it's about their strategic plan moving forward. Now, we all know they've had a bit of quite a few problems over the last year or two, so it's good to see that they're planning for the future. Being an ex-Admona footballer, I'm just happy to see that they are planning to get up and running again.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Would a councillor like to speak to the motion? So we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Next item is 7.5, findings, no-fee waste day trials at the Shepparton and Murchison Resource Recovery Centres, January 2020. There's a recommendation on page 23. Would a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor Patterson?
I'll move the motion, Madam Mayor.
Thank
I
you.
won't read it out, it's quite long and involved, as we can see. I'll
As-
move the 7.5 on page 23, the recommendation there, as read.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Do I have a seconder?
Can I just ask that the motion be read out, just so people know what we're talking about?
Sorry, did you want me to read it out?
Yes.
Right. Okay.
It's not mandatory, though,
I'm happy to
Oh,
read
but
it
if you
out.
want to. Okay.
Note the findings from the no-fee waste day trial, that no further no-fee waste days will be pursued. 2, note there are major financial implications from the state government policy, Recycling Victoria, which will need to be incorporated into future budgets. Number 3, not implement a waste voucher scheme, which would result in an additional cost in the order of $375,000 for one voucher scheme, increasing to $750,000 with introduction of the state waste policy, which is about to come. And 4, expedite the project identified in the waste strategy to assist members of the community to experience mobility and transport issues to more easily dispose of household waste. This will include working with charity organisations and community groups to provide a service to those most in need from our community.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Do I have a seconder? Any seconder?
Yes, I'll second it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelman. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you. This has been, we thought when we got into this, this would be a pretty hot topic. Free waste is very popular. Free anything is very popular. But my concern is it's not free at all. The ratepayers that didn't go out to the tip that day actually paid for those that did. We have a big responsibility with waste. It's when you first get on the council, you don't realise the cost that waste incurs on the community, and it's large. There was approximately 5% of the population of our ratepayer base used that. Some used it a couple of times. Again, I get back to those that didn't use it, paid for the ones that did. Now, it's not an issue for us to provide a service to our ratepayers to get rid of their rubbish. So I have no problem with that, but I think what a lot of people miss out on is the fact of the cost involved to them and to ratepayers and to the council and to everyone else. Most of that cost, and I keep harping on it, is $32, I think it is now, per cubic metre of waste that council has to pay the EPA for every cubic metre of waste we receive. So it's not a matter of just us having to pick it up, take it somewhere and dump it. You know, apart from actually us paying for people to go and do the physical work, whether it be a Saturday or Sunday or running trucks out there, I can wear that. But when we've got to pay $32 a cubic metre for that rubbish, it becomes a lot more expensive. I think there was 40-something mattresses. A mattress we charged, I think, $10 or $20 for, and it costs us another $10 or $20. We've got to process that mattress. We can't just throw it out there. We legally have to pay someone to pull all the material out, get the metal out of it, and separate it before we process it. A great cost to the council and to the ratepayers. So, you know, when you buy a bed, your responsibility is to get rid of the other one. You know? So everyone's got to be responsible for their own rubbish. You'll see parks these days take your rubbish home. You know, you are responsible for your own rubbish. So we all have bins, we pay a garbage rate, and that's what we should be using. We all at stages have to use the recycle centre or the transfer station. I did last week, and you know, you've got to pay for it. Otherwise, someone else is paying it for you. So that's my concern. You know, I know it was a very populous thing to do for some people, but I think a lot of people sat there and seeing what was happening and think, well, I'm paying for these people to do this. I don't think that's fair. I pay my rate dues and I put my rubbish in the bin. If I want to take extra, I pay for it. So that's the way I see it, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Hazelman.
Yes, thank you,
Would you
Madam
like
Mayor.
to
I think
speak to
Councillor Patterson virtually summed it up right at the outset when he said there's no such thing as free waste. Someone is paying for it. The days out there would be regarded as popular. A lot of people took advantage of it. It did create a lot of logistical problems along Wanganui Road. Quite clearly, the infrastructure out there is not suitable for large numbers of people in a short period of time. Physically getting people through the gate into the transfer station itself will always be an issue. There is only so many people who can get through at any one time, and that's going to be a difficulty if we were going to ever think about trying to do something like a waste day there into the future. One interesting thing that I thought came out of the survey results was that less than 2% of the people that use it, it was their first time. So 98% of the people using the waste day, they'd been there before. So it's not as if they didn't understand what the process was or didn't understand what the costs were. In respect of the cost, where other councils do operate, whether it's hard rubbish or waste voucher schemes or waste days, I took some time to have a look through the budgets of various councils that do offer these schemes and contrasted them with our own, and did note that where councils did operate either tip vouchers or hard rubbish collections, their charges for curbside collection were significantly higher than ours. And so I would conclude from that, again on there is no free lunch proposal, that the funding of the free component is actually being paid for by people through their curbside collection being higher. So I think that that would be an aspect that if we were ever seriously looking into the future of these types of proposals, we'd have to seriously look at the increasing of our own garbage collection charges to compensate.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelman. Would a councillor like to speak against the motion?
Mayor, I don't know whether I'm speaking against it. It's more of a point of clarification and following up from Councillor Hazelman. Point 1 says, note the findings from the no-fee waste day trial and that no further no-fee waste days will be pursued. How final is that? Is that putting a date on it that it will never to be pursued ever again, or is it just in the foreseeable future? I'm just not... Could maybe Mr Harriet can clarify that, or not?
Mr Harriet, would you like to clarify?
Councillor Adam, I think that's quite clear. The report indicates that the no-fee waste day was not successful, and therefore the officer's recommendation is that they not be entertained again. So that's the intent of that.
Ever again. So that makes your point moot, Councillor Hazelman.
If I could further explain that, Madam Mayor, my assumption would be that at some time in the future, the concept of free waste will come back in some shape or form.
Thank you. Thanks for that clarification, and I hope your query is answered. Councillor Adam?
A lot of rubbish.
I'll go back to our formal proceedings again. Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I don't agree with this recommendation, and my reasons being that these waste day trials found that the community really appreciated being able to clean up their rubbish and take it to the resource recovery centres in both Shepparton and Murchison for free. I realise there were some frustrations with traffic control on the first day at Shepparton, and this was corrected on the second day. I don't think we should have no-fee waste days, but I do think that we should at least provide a voucher scheme for the community, similar to what other councils in Victoria do. After all, we are a council, and roads, rates and rubbish are what we are all about.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Would a councillor like to speak for the motion? Would a councillor like to speak to the
Madam Mayor, could I speak to the motion?
motion?
Yes, please.
Yes, Councillor Raswari.
Thank you. Look, taken a long while for this concept of nothing is free to get through my thick skull, because as Councillor Sutton has said, roads, rates and rubbish is what council's about. But there is a cost, and there's a cost which attaches to some form or some part of the council operations. And I, for one, think that taking rubbish to the tip, the price that is charged is exorbitant. That's my individual opinion. And the figures would say that that's the economic reality of what we have to pay in order to dispose of our rubbish. Modern society today is a consumer-based society that pride themselves on collecting as much garbage as possible and then finding it difficult or lazy to dispose of it in appropriate ways. One only has to drive around the outskirts of Shepparton to see where popular rubbish dumping areas exist. Now, in terms of this particular recommendation, at the here and now, at this present moment that we sit and we debate this particular topic, I don't really have any choice but to support it. Down the track, it would be probably a different story, because I do think that there is a place for the voucher system, and I do take comments on board from Councillor Hazelman, who says that by studying other council budgets, hidden away the cost of removing that rubbish with free tip days and curbside collection and things of that nature, there's always a cost attached to it. So I reluctantly support the recommendation, but in the terms of the circumstances we find ourselves at the moment, I do support it.
Thank you, Councillor Raswari. Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor O'Keefe.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, it's interesting with Councillor Patterson's quote that, 80% of people that actually turned up on the day had used the facility before, but when it's free, they're, coming out and getting rid of, sorry, if it was higher than that, whatever your
Didn't say that.
percentage
Hazelman
was.
said that.
Sorry,
Councillor
Councillor
Hazelman
Hazelman. Sorry, Councillor
Said
Hazelman.
98%.
Sorry, 98% of people had used the facility before. At what time span, we don't know that. But I think council has a duty, to our community to control this rubbish issue that we have, and we have a big problem with it. We have a lot of dumping. We have a lot of people that have things within their house that they can't get rid of. I think there comes a point of time where I believe it was successful, the actual 2 days in January. It was a bit of mayhem as far as controlling the traffic, and that, again, I think was council's fault. We were prepared for that to happen. We weren't prepared enough to address it. So I really believe that the community, when it comes down to their rates and what we spend their rates on, this is a priority. We have to look at priorities within the community, how we spend the rates. And rubbish, to me, is a priority, and it's something that keeps coming back to us. Yes, we have a budget. We have to work within our budget. We are very stretched at the moment, but I do believe that, giving each ratepayer a tip voucher would help, a lot, would help our community, and it would certainly, help calm this issue that keeps coming back to council, and not just us, but many councils. I know lots of people that live in different areas that all have, hard rubbish collection. They have vouchers. Most of my family, I'm one of 7, all of them live in different locations. Every single one of my brothers and sisters gets a tip voucher or a hard rubbish collection that live in a different municipality. So I think, the time's come where we have to really think about prioritising things within our community, and to me, rubbish is a priority. So I certainly won't be supporting the recommendation.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Would a councillor like to speak for the motion? Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Summer?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I've probably spoken enough about this topic, but I'm going to speak again. It just seems to me like this is an ideological decision. Council won't do anything that's popular. I mean, it's obvious that 99% of the population would be well served by tip tickets and think it's a great idea. It's what the people asked us to do. They voted with their feet. We took 14,000 loads over just a couple of days, so how much more proof do we really need? Yeah, the waste levy would probably need to increase to cover this, but as mentioned, waste management is a core council responsibility. We're not hitting our waste target right now, and we need to try something to help diversion. If it gets people there, great, because otherwise it ends up in the river. The report said that, and councillors say that some people took issue with subsidising services that they don't necessarily use, but that's exactly what council does. We fill the gap between what the community needs as far as services and private enterprise who make a profit. We're in the middle there. We are a subsidising organisation. User pays only seems to be an issue when it's something that the people want. In the report it mentions socialist dollars. Well, millions of socialist dollars are being forced into the new SAM project and no one wanted that. So should we make exceptions for no children families who subsidise public playgrounds? Like, really, where does this end? How does this user pays, no subsidy philosophy stack up with applying a municipal charge to the rates? The projections that we've got here are based on a 50% uptake. That is unrealistic, overinflated. We had a 5.5% uptake with the free days, and my understanding is we haven't made any attempt to compare uptake figures with other councils who do provide this service. We had the opportunity to do that, and it hasn't been done. We're giving out more money in grants today than what it would cost us to offer this, but it just seems like the agenda of this council is to not do what the people want. So, councillors, if we do pass this motion today, we will not get another opportunity to revisit it. Yes, we can pass another motion, but this is basically it. Item 4 promises targeted assistance for the elderly and disabled, but we've been saying that for years and no formal action has been taken. Every single person in this municipality deserves to dispose of their waste with dignity, and our job is to help them do it. So let's give the people a break, vote the motion down, and come back with something that the people actually want. You can change your vote even if you spoke to it.
Thank you, Councillor Summer. Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? I would like to add my own...
I haven't spoken yet.
Okay.
I asked for a clarification. I wasn't speaking.
Would you like to speak for?
Yes, against.
Against. Okay. We are going through the
If
four
I may.
cycle.
Ask for the 4. There's no 4.
I was going to speak. I'll just make one comment. Supporting the motion, the recommendation, the motion. Points 1, 2, and 3. It's very all the financial details, and it's quite convincing. Item number 4 is something, as Councillor Summer is highlighting, that is sort of, this is something that has not been provided, we don't know when it's going to be provided. I have sought that clarification, and this, personally, I believe that a targeted support is more beneficial, which this point number 4 is covering, and there is some allocation in 2020 and 2021 budget. So that is there. That's why, hence my confidence that this particular project will be delivered, whereby the service will be provided to those who are really in need and who are experiencing issues such as mobility or transport issues, or are elderly people or disabled people who have genuine need to have these services available to them. So that's my point of view. I would stop here and invite any other councillor, that is Councillor Adam, to speak against the motion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I won't be questioning the financial report here or any of the actual surveys. I'm sure they're all correct. However, that point 1 is something that I really can't agree with. That closes the door on any future no-fee days or tip voucher days for that matter. And by not supporting this motion tonight, that doesn't imply that we will be having another fee waste day at all. That's another motion for another time to be discussed. I don't want to shut the door on anything in the future that we may want to revisit. So for that matter alone, for that fact alone, I won't be supporting this.
Move an amendment.
No, I don't want to move an amendment. Councillor Hazelman, but thank you for the advice.
Everybody has spoken. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak? Would you like to use your right of reply?
Yes, thanks very much, Madam Mayor. We can go into arguing about, people voted with their feet and 5% went along. It means 95% didn't. I have no issue with that. There's people that definitely want it. That is not an issue. We all accept that. My point is, it's free. It's not free at all. Now, I have no issue if we want to give tip vouchers. That's fine, but we have to allow for that and put it in our surcharges, garbage surcharge. Otherwise, we've got to find we've got to take loans out to pay for the $32 per cubic metre to the EPA. That's the whole point. It's not free. So people have to be responsible, and we're responsible for it. We've got to pay this money. So I have no issue if we have to increase the garbage charge and give people 2 free tip tickets and give them 2 free tip days. I'm not against that. The fact that it's advertised as free and it's not is my issue. And if we want to look at increasing the budget for waste, I have no issue. I'd support that.
Well,
but it's not
point
free.
of order, it doesn't say free, it says no fee, and we can always revisit the waste charge.
No fee.
No fee.
Well, that means free to me.
No.
Well, what's the difference?
Well, we can increase the waste charge, like you said. Voting this down would get rid of any no fee.
Disagree. No fee means there's no cost involved, right? And it means it's free. Who's paying for it? Council.
Okay, Councillor Patterson, you have used your right
Sorry.
of reply.
Yeah.
Thanks for raising that clarification, Councillor Summer. That's the understanding, and about no fee, that it's a public perception that no fee means free, whereas, yes, as you have pointed out, there are costs attached to it. I think everybody has spoken. We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Okay. Those against?
Vision, please, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Summer, we have to go to first declare our voting results, then we go for division. Thank you. So those against? Sorry, that was 2, 3, 4. Okay, so we are again in that scenario. We have equal votes for, against, and in favor, which means that the Mayor will have to use her casting vote. As I've said in my comments, the reason that I support this recommendation, I'll be supporting this motion, which means that the motion is carried.
Division, please, Madam Mayor.
Okay. Those in favor? Councillor Hazelman, Councillor Patterson, Councillor Abdullah, Councillor Orsvari. Those against? Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Adam, Councillor Sutton, and Councillor Summer. Thank you. We'll now move to our next item, 7.6. Oh, sorry, it's 8.1 actually. Yep, 8.1. Community Arts Grants Round 2, 2019 and 2020. There's a recommendation on page 30. Would a councillor like to move a motion, please?
I'm happy to move that, Madam Mayor.
Councillor O'Keefe.
The recommendation on page 30 that the council allocate $3,380, including GST, of funding under round 2 of the Community Arts Grants Program 2019-2020 to the following applicants that are listed there on page 30.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sutton? Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, it's great to support the ones that have got these grants. I think it's a little bit disappointing we haven't had more applicants. Obviously, this was prior to the COVID-19, so obviously we can't use that as a reason, but I think it's important that perhaps we get this word out to the community broader that these grants, these arts grants are available. It's great to see the Shepparton Mallee Association. They do a great job across the community with their performances and with their community interactions, their promotions of the arts. So $800 I'm sure will help them continue. And also the fantastic Shepparton Brass and Wind Brass Band. They do an incredible job, and I'm sure that amount of funding will also help them support their instruction team.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Sutton, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. These are small amounts, but they're going to be very beneficial to the 2 organisations that have been given the amount. So one is that it'll be teaching children as well as adults, if they want to, how to play Shepparton brass and wind instruments. And the other one is for the Mallee Association, and that's to have equipment and costumes for the Onan Festival. So I think they'll both be well and truly worth having. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? Would a councillor like to speak for the motion?
No, I'm waiting to vote,
Okay.
Madam Mayor.
All right, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Okay, next item is item 8.2 on page 37, Community Matching Grant Scheme, Round 2, 2019-2020. There's a recommendation on page 37. Would a councillor like to move a motion, please? This
I'll move
side,
the recommendation,
Councillor
Madam Mayor, on page
Roswari.
37.
Yeah?
Items 1 and 2 within the recommendation, which I won't read out.
Okay, that's fine. Is there a seconder? Councillor O'Keefe?
Yeah, I'm happy to second that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Roswari, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, essentially, for those that are not familiar with these grants, we launched, when I say we, the council launched the Community Matching Grant Scheme in September of 2011, and they're designed to support projects from the Greater Shepparton community, which build new social connections and partnerships within communities or reinforce those that already exist, and a number of other criteria. On this occasion, the grant review panel has decided to support 11 projects, which are detailed in the body of the recommendation. And of note, it's that $38,646, GST inclusive, which represents round 2 for the 2019-20. And it's interesting to see the various applicants and the range and nature of the various projects that will be supported. And I note there that the men's shed will have its roofing replaced for the work and recreational area. And having been there on a couple of occasions, they do great work, and I'm glad they're being supported, and I'm glad they made the application.
Thank you, Councillor Roswari. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And obviously there's going to be a little bit of disruption at the moment in regard to these facilities being able to be used, but we all know that things will move forward. I'm very pleased to see the East Shepparton Bowls Club get their $5,000 matching grant for their seating for their new complex. I have been out there and it looks sensational. So it's going to be a much used and great attraction to Greater Shepparton, that facility. So great to see such support for such an incredible infrastructure build out there, and well done to the East Shepparton Bowls Club. Just to note, the Greater Shepparton Winter Night Shelter, I have been involved with that committee, and it will be postponed until 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic. It will certainly be going ahead, and it will still be business as normal as far as planning for 2021 for the Greater Shepparton Winter Night Shelter, so it's great to also see that supported. It's obviously a much needed thing that will occur over the winter to support and to house the homeless people over the cold months. But unfortunately, due to the COVID-19 this year, we haven't been able to source enough funding to kick it off. But we are working very hard as a committee to continue to make sure that the homeless people within our community are still looked after and we're aware of what's happening. And just finally, there's some great ones there. Also, Telegroup and Men's Shed, Marina Bowls Club, some great clubs there doing great work, and hopefully it won't be too long until we're all, back on the ground and doing what they do best.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Just about your comments that you have declared that Greater Shepparton Winter Night Shelter Committee, you are on this committee?
Yes.
It would constitute a conflict of interest, I understand.
Okay.
Would you like to declare your conflict of interest?
Yeah, I will. I'll declare my conflict, sorry.
Okay, thank you. And would you like to maybe perhaps leave the room and then we will call you once the decision is made?
Okay,
Thank you.
sure.
What about the last item?
So we'll need a seconder. Thank you.
I'll second the motion, Madam.
Councillor Adam, thank you.
Point of
Would you like-
clarification. Sorry, Madam Mayor. There's an item further on where Councillor Patterson's on a committee. Does that mean he needs to declare a conflict as well?
So which committee is that?
The water.
That's a council representation, whereas in this case, this committee is not a council committee. It's not a councillor representation on this committee that Councillor O'Keefe has. This winter night shelter.
Have to refresh my knowledge of conflicts of interest. Thank you.
Well, I'm pretty clear on this one. So thank you. Okay, we go back to motion. So you have seconded this motion.
I
Would
have.
you like to speak to
Yes,
this
just
motion?
briefly. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
I just want to add on to the comments of Councillor Orazvari. That I think what really struck me is the range and diversity of these grants. I think it's fantastic, actually. You've got bowls clubs, sporting clubs, cultural clubs, search and rescue. But one that brought that sort of focused my attention was the Horses for Hope program. I was lucky enough to go out there a few years ago with a few councillors, and the program that they have out there is quite remarkable. And I just think it's fantastic that they've been able to score about $4,500 for some equipment purchase. I'm sure that'll go a long way, so I fully support this.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? Would a councillor like to speak to the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Yes, Councillor Hazelman.
There is a diversity of projects there, but the one I was going to highlight was the Golden Valley Chinese Association about raising bilingual children in a multicultural society, and that this is a very interesting and exciting project. They've working in partnership with the School of Languages and Linguistics at the University of Melbourne, and we'll be presenting a variety of workshops and to provide support for Chinese families and their children.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hazelman. Would a councillor like to speak to the motion? Okay, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you, and we'll invite Councillor to join us. Thank you. Okay, next item is 8.3 on page 47, Community Engagement Policy. There's a recommendation on page 47. Would a councillor like to move a motion, please?
I'll move the motion.
Councillor
as
Summer, thank you.
printed on page 47, that the council adopt the community engagements policy 07.POL4.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Adam, thank you. Councillor Summer, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just briefly, the policy itself is a bit light on, but I did really like the report that accompanied that policy. It highlighted that letterbox drops are something the community want, and also that they want to be consulted at the development stage of plans, not necessarily presented with a finished plan that they may or may not get to comment on. So hopefully we will follow through with these, because there's quite a lot of opportunities where letterbox drops and talking to people before we develop a plan can come to the fore.
Thank you. Councillor Adam, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just briefly again, it's a very short recommendation, about 8 or 9 words, but it's a very important policy. This is really the core of what we are as a council to a degree. Pretty much everything we do requires community engagement, and anything we can do to strengthen that and make it better, keep working on it, is something that I fully support. I'm happy with what we're doing here, but I want to keep moving forward with this each year and look at it and strengthen it and make it even better than it potentially is right now.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? No? Would a councillor like to speak to the motion? Okay, so now we'll go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried, unopposed. Thank you. Okay. Next is item 9.1 on page 51. Contracts awarded under delegation and contracts advertised but yet to be awarded. There's a recommendation on page 51. Would a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor Oraswari.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll move the recommendation contained on page 51, items, well, it's short enough, I'll read it. The Council note 1, contracts awarded under delegated authority by the Chief Executive Officer. 2, contracts awarded under delegated authority by a Director. And 3, requests for tenders advertised but not yet awarded.
Thank you, Councillor Oraswari. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Patterson. Thank you. Councillor Oraswari, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity. As I always say, this is a roadmap in relation to the goings-on in Council in terms of infrastructure project contracts, things that are coming up, things that have been advertised, tenders and things of that nature. It's quite vast in its breadth and length, and I'm particularly interested in the Dookie-Cosgrove Rail Trail because I think Dookie is a sleeping giant as far as development is concerned, and they'll get there one day, and there's a whole range of other projects and tenders. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Oraswari. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, quickly, there's several good ones there that are about to come out, which would be great. I'm particularly pleased the Ferrari Park car park curb and drainage has been awarded. It's been a long time coming. We've been looking forward to that. The council have done a great job over at Ferrari Park over the years, and this is the last thing basically to be done. It will set the whole thing off. I got pulled into a breathalyser there about a month ago, and the potholes were that deep. It was sort of embarrassing to say that you're sort of a councillor to get, of course I hadn't been drinking, but it'll be great when the whole area is finished with no truck parking there now, and it beautifies the area. And being a good citizen, I have no issue with being breathalyzed, and I think there should be more of it because it lets all us be safe in the community.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? Would a councillor like to speak for the motion? Okay, we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried, unopposed. Thank you. Next is item number 9.2, Instrument of Delegation, Members of Staff and Development Hearings Panel. On page 55, this report starts, and there's a recommendation on page 56. Would a councillor like to move a motion, please?
Yeah, Madam Mayor, I'll move the recommendation as printed on page 56.
Thank you. Councillor Hazelman. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sutton. Thank you. Councillor Hazelman, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor. Essentially an administrative process, and it keeps recurring back here at Council due to internal staff movements, variations in the Act. It means that each time that happens, we are required to vary the instrument of delegation. So I would imagine it'll keep reoccurring on our agenda.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Hazelman. Councillor Sutton, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Sutton. Councillor Summers, sorry, pardon me.
It's not necessarily speaking against it. I just don't know if I can vote for it because I did ask why we were doing this again at the 6-month mark, not the 12-month mark. And there was some reference to changes in the act of movement of staff just then, but I haven't heard back on why it's necessary. So without all the information, I'll probably abstain from voting.
Thank you. Councillor Summer? Okay, so we'll now go to the vote. So you haven't spoken in against, or it's just a comment?
It's just that I haven't been given the information.
All right. Councillor Hazelman, would you like to
Not necessarily.
speak now? Okay, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Okay. Motion carried. Councillor Summer abstained from the voting. Thank you.
Actually, can I please call a division on that too, please?
Check.
Clarification on that, please.
Can we get some clarification on whether division can be called when?
Abstained.
Doesn't matter. Okay, so those in favour? Councillor Hazelman, Councillor Patterson, Councillor O'Keefe, Councillor Adam, Councillor Abdullah, Councillor Oriswari, and Councillor Sutton, and Councillor Summer has abstained from the vote.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, next is item 9.3 on page 59, March 2020 monthly financial report. And there's a recommendation on page 59. Would a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor Oriswari.
I'll move the recommendation, Madam Mayor, that the council receive and note the March 2020 monthly financial report on page 59.
Thank you very much. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Adam, is that your?
Yes, I'll second it, Madam Mayor. Certainly, I'll.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Oriswari, would you like to speak to the motion?
Oh, look, a couple of things that I noted down at the briefing. Essentially, the operating performance year-to-date is steady as she goes. Looking at some of the figures, there's an unfavourable amount there of $2.5 million, which is in relation to user charges and other revenue. And the explanation that's been provided in relation to that is basically COVID-19, together with the aqua moves, the stadium, and Riverlinks, which have been closed as a result of that, and that's led to a drop-off in income. That's not terribly hard to understand. Capital works, figure that I noted, 43.6 million currently expended, which is approximately 59% of the budget spent to date. Current forecast suggests that full expenditure for the year is expected to be achieved, and we are optimistic that that'll occur. Proof will be in the pudding. Essentially, everything else as is.
Thank you, Councillor Oriswari. Councillor Adam, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, look, Madam Mayor, I'll make a general comment. I pretty much support what Councillor Oriswari said. I think he covered it quite well, covered the key points. But one thing we should consider is with this COVID-19 and the problems and challenges that may present, not just to this council, but to every council moving forward, I think it's noteworthy to say that this council is well positioned financially and always has been. So it's a credit to our organisation, to their capacity to be, I suppose, correct and some foresight with our financial planning. I think it was noted today in our briefings that we're one of the best placed councils in Victoria, if not Australia, in respect to handling this challenge of COVID-19. So I think that's a credit to our organisation and to the CEO and to all the financial people and all the staff. I think that's held us in great stead moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks, Councillor Adam. Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? Would a councillor like to speak for the motion? Councillor Patterson.
Just quickly, thank you, Madam Mayor. Councillor Osvari got it spot on. We're down 2.25 in operating performance, which Councillor Osvari explained. We'll make a bit of that up with the wages saved on that sort of thing. But again, Councillor Adams spot on too. It's very difficult times coming ahead. We're lucky we've had a history of this council being very financially rewarding, responsible. It goes back a long time, since formation basically of the three councils. I believe they've always acted very financially responsible, and that does leave us in a reasonably strong position, which we're going to need to be to lead the community out of this, because it will be up to council to show some leadership. Already I know we've all been briefed that we're trying to pay our bills in 7 days instead of 30 days to keep the community ticking over, and that's going to be part of our role in the future. And yeah, I congratulate the attitude they've taken, council's taken, and yeah, thanks for the people who have sat in those chairs in previous years that have this council in a good financial position.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? Yes, Councillor Summer.
I would like to speak to the motion. It's a report of what we've done, so I can't really change it. Reading it was interesting. They mention a target band for loans between 20 and 70%. That's quite huge. The way that they say target is also a little bit concerning. I don't think 70% is something to aspire to. Speaking of financially responsible forebearers, we didn't have any loans in 2008, and already we're approaching past the 20% mark, and justifying it by looking at what other councils do without looking at the velocity by which we're borrowing. We have borrowed more than the other councils within a certain amount of time. We used to have no borrowings. And there's a lot of reference to the loss that we can see, the unfavourable variance of fees, charges and other. It's nearly $3 million, $2.91 million, but the favourable variance in materials and services more than make up for this, because the favourable variance was $3.22 million. So the way I see it, we're seeing considerable savings from the closure of some facilities with COVID-19, and that needs to be investigated on how we can possibly improve on that and tighten our belt when it comes to things. I know we're told we need to keep some capital works going to try and continue the economy, and that's a nice laudable impression, but considering our stimulus for COVID was only $1.5 million, I do hope that we put a lot more effort into spreading that around the community and putting any savings we make back out there. The capital works having only been about halfway through by this time of the year, the same thing happened last year. I'd like to see those projects better spread than trying to rush everything through at the end. We need to rebudget something like $3 million worth of capital items, and this needs to be prevented in the future. It was flagged last year. I hope this time it's taken seriously and we don't get to this point again.
Thank you, Councillor Summer. Would any councillor would like to speak to the motion? Okay. We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Councillor Patterson, are you going to the vote? Those in favour? Okay. Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Item number 9.4 on page 67, 2019-2020 Quarter 3 Forecast Review. There's a recommendation on page 61. Would a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor Patterson.
Yes, I'll move the recommendation on page 61. The council adopt the revised forecast identified by the 2019-2020 Quarter 3 Forecast Review.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Orasvari. Thank you. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Just quickly, there's been some standards set with this month's reduction in income, etc., from what we've just discussed, and we're suggesting that will continue on for the unforeseen future. Very hard times to run a budget. I think we'll be looking at it every month and adjusting, but we've got to do it. We've got to have a budget, so endorse it. Let's move on.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Orasvari, would you like to speak to the motion?
Oh, look, it's just for interest's sake, for the benefit of the viewing public, I made a a note in relation to the breakdown of the areas where we've lost user fees. Aquamove's 800,000, Early Childhood 700,000, Riverlinks 250 and Kids Town 100,000. So that gives a bit of clarity in relation to the user fees. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? Okay, so we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion, Councillor Summer, are you? Okay. Right, motion carried unopposed. Okay, next is item 10.1, adoption of amendment C205, Greater Shepparton Heritage Study, Stage 2. That's a recommendation on page 65. Would a councillor like to move a motion, please? Councillor Sutton, what's your motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I won't read it all out,
Yep.
but I'll move the recommendation as a motion on page 65 and 66.
Thank you very much, Councillor Sutton. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hazelman. Thank you. Councillor Sutton, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd note that council officers have been working on this heritage study for quite a few years. We've done, there was one in 2011 and 13th of June in this one's now, but there's three studies that have been condensed into this new study, and they've been working on it for quite a while. There's lots of different things have been happening in this draft study. The draft study has included updated information, and the amendment C205 to Greater Shepparton Planning Scheme was exhibited for a period of 10 weeks so that everybody could have a look at it and get to make comments. 44 submissions were received and a panel hearing was held on the 3rd of the 12th, 19. This panel hearing recommended that the amendment should be adopted with a number of changes that were discussed, and the amendment has been changed to reflect these recommendations. The CO25 amendment will assist Greater Shepparton to preserve the places of local cultural heritage significance for future generations to enjoy. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Councillor Hazelman, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Would a councillor like to speak against the motion? Would a councillor like to speak to the motion? So we'll now go to the vote. All those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 10.2, Tatura RV-friendly township proposal. There's a recommendation on page 80. Would a councillor like to move a motion? Councillor Oraswari.
I'd like to move.
Sorry, go ahead.
I'd like to move the recommendation contained on page 80, items 1 through 4 inclusive. Do you want me to read it out, or?
That's fine if you have
Yes, please.
mentioned.
We would love to hear
Read it
it,
out.
thank you, Councillor.
Yes, please.
Thank you, Thomas. I'll read it out. That the council allocates space in the Douglas Street car park, Tatura, for a trial period of 12 months for up to 3 fully self-contained RVs only to camp for up to 48 hours only. 2, note that in assessing the success of the trial, measures will be taken including the monitoring of the site via CCTV, increased patronage and expenditure in the township via photograph your receipt and send-in program, and an increased profile of Tatura in the RV marketplace. 3, approve associated expenses of providing the facilities and policing the site. 4, note that due to the current restrictions imposed by COVID-19, council officers will determine the most appropriate time for the trial to commence.
Thank you, Councillor Oraswari. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Adam. Thank you. Councillor Oraswari, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor, for the opportunity. This, from my perspective, is a no-brainer, and I'm surprised that we haven't gotten onto the bandwagon sooner. I have a long and enthusiastic history in relation to all things camping, caravanning, and so on and so forth, and I study this space with a great deal of interest, particularly more so now that YouTube is inundated with a lot of people that are travelling around the countryside doing the very things that this recommendation suggests. This, I can honestly say, it's just, as I say, it's a no-brainer. I think it's very positive that Council's actually taken the bull by the horns. There's been a lot of work, excuse me, a lot of work gone into it. And I get that the Victorian Caravan Parks Association opposes providing free camping dump points because it's a commercial decision for them. Unfortunately, like anything, you need to move with the times. It's a competitive area. There are some very tight timelines. There's only 3 fully self-contained RVs, and it's a maximum of 48 hours only. And in the industry where people who travel around the countryside travel, their word of mouth really is a great form of advertising, and positive feedback in things of this nature, particularly in relation to the CCTV type security, together with the fact that if we measure the amount of success that people come into the town and they pass it around through their communities, then we're going to get positive feedback. And I think it's great that we're trialling it for 12 months, and the proof will be in the pudding.
Thank you very much, Councillor Oraswari. Councillor Adam, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I'll just add a couple of comments to Councillor Oraswari's comments. It's only 3 sites. It's a 12-month trial. I can't see any valid reasons why anyone would complain in the private world to this. It's more about noting that Tatura is an RV-friendly town, and that's what we're trying to promote here. Hopefully it will be successful. I'm sure it will, and in 12 months we can reassess it and potentially do something more.
Thank you very much, Councillor Adam. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak to the motion?
For the motion.
For the motion, yes.
Yep. Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Yeah, Councillor Osvari said we've grabbed the bull by the horn, but I reckon we've grabbed the calf by the ear. I can't believe the restrictions we've put on here. Like, it is a no-brainer, as Councillor Osvari said. We've put so many restrictions on. There's not a town in outback New South Wales, Queensland, anywhere you go, South Australia, that are RV friendly. You know? And we're expecting 3 caravan loads of Hell's Angels to pull up over the way. We've got surveillance cameras on them. It's over the top. Anyway, I'm happy to let it go. Let's look at it 12 months down the track and see what we can do then. But we tried to get one down here. It's all been too hard for council. Now, I don't know why there's a blocker somewhere in the system. This at least has got something going. It's a start, right? But as far as the bull by the horn, sorry, Les, I reckon we've got the calf by the tail.
Okay, righto.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Patterson. Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Okay, we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Moving on to our next item, 10.3. This is about Zirkas Lane Basin Extension. There's a recommendation on page 90. There is a slight modification, and the one on the screen has got the correct figure for recommendation point number 1. The amount is $394,227.90, including GST. That's the correct recommendation and the amount that's mentioned there.
Point of clarification, Madam Mayor, just in relation to the difference between the original notice of motion, the recommendation, and the new one.
Was the ex-GST amount?
Okay, yeah, for the viewers, that's all.
Sure, thank you. Okay, so with this item number 10.3 and the recommendation that I have pointed out towards, can I have a mover, please? Councillor Adam, thank
Yes,
you.
thanks,
What's
Madam
your...
Mayor. I will move the recommendation on page 90, and I'll read it out, it's not that long. The recommendation is, or the motion is, that the council authorise the purchase of part of the land at 286 Dawes Road, Shepparton, from the landowner to allow the upsizing of the Circus Lane Basin for an amount of, what's the new amount, sorry? $394,227.90, including GST. Point 2, authorise the carrying out of necessary actions to effect this purchase in the 2019-2020 financial year. Authorise the CEO to sign and seal all documents associated with or necessary to effect the land purchase.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Do I have a seconder?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hazelman. Thank you. Councillor Adam, would you like to speak to the motion?
Again, just briefly, this is an extension to an existing portion of land for a basin, from what I understand. Obviously, it's needed, much needed, plus it will allow that area to further expand. I'm sure the owner of those properties around there are very happy about this, because it'll allow them to move forward with their own developments, but it's just a part of an evolving and progressing Shepparton.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Councillor Hazelman, would you like to speak to the motion?
Very, very briefly, Madam Mayor, that the expansion is required because of changes to Golden Murray water standards for retardation. So to meet those standards, we need to acquire more land.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelman. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Okay. We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Okay, next item is 10.4. There's a recommendation. This is about Community Sustainability Grants, Round 2, 2019-2020. There's a recommendation on page 96. Would a councillor like to move a motion, please?
I'm happy to move that, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Councillor O'Keefe, thank you.
The recommendation that the council adopt the recommendation of the Community Sustainability Grants Assessment Panel to fund the following 2 sustainability grants to the total value of $4,200, and those 2 grants are to Transition Tatura, Community Shaping Future Sustainability Housing, and Guthrie Street Primary School Sustainability Gardening.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Sutton. Thank you. I was looking at Councillor. Yep. So you're seconded. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Again, possibly some of these projects are going to be on hold, but it is important that we continue to keep the wheel turning and have the funds there when we are back in motion. It's great to see the Transition Tatura doing their little short film festival with their speakers, food and fellowship, their entertainment and coming together as a community. And it's also great to see the Guthrie Street Primary School putting together their sustainable garden.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Sutton, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you.
Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Okay. So we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Next is item 10.5, Council position on Murray-Darling Basin Plan. There's a recommendation on page 103. Would a councillor like to move a motion, please? Councillor Patterson? What's your motion?
I'm not going to read it out, but it's there on page 103 with my glasses off, 10.5.
Okay, thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'll second the motion, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Adam? Okay, thank you. Councillor Patterson, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. I think, well, I know all councils understand how valuable water is to this region. Council has spent an enormous amount of time and money in the last 4 or 5 years since the basin plan was coming to inception, and a lot of that has been put into the Golden Murray Irrigation District Leadership Group, which council has been very active and represented by the CEO. Been very active and had lots of reports generated, etc., to identify the issues. And every report we get comes up with the same scenario. And these reports have been followed up by state government reports, which have shown exactly the same figures. You know, this region and GMID have really taken a hard hit with this. And we lost 550 million a year since 2012 production. Lost 1,000 jobs in that time. Our our farmers are paying $20 million a year more than they would have before this in temporary water prices. It's cost us a lot of money, it's cost us a lot of jobs, a lot of our issues, even with our CBD, are a direct result of the water and the lack of jobs that's gone with it. We've basically, council has tackled it on two fronts, and one is the GMID Leadership Group, which I've just spoken about. It's had several reports done. The other one is a Murray-Darling Association, which we've been a member of now for about 5 or 6 years, and I'm the council rep on that, and I currently chair Region 2, which takes in Moira Shire, Shepparton, Berrigan Shire and Edwards River Shire, and that forms the basis of Region 2. The whole concept of the report here is to allow us to have an official position that we can actually act on. Before, we didn't have any official position. We'd never taken any actual official position on it, so we can actually move motions, second motions against the plan. Right? This allows us now to go with our neighbours at Region 2 and develop some motions, and those motions you can basically cop up what is in there. You know, the big one is there's a move to buy back 450 megs of water out of our irrigation scheme. That will be just detrimental to our whole district, and that's one of the main things we're working on. We will be working on, and you know, north of the Murray have been hit at least as hard, if not harder than us. Now, their dairy's been basically decimated. There's only a couple of dairy farmers left. Here, the report says we've only been down 20% in dairies, but I think that's very conservative, and that also has an impact. The dairy.
Councillor Patterson, would you like to have some time, an extension of time, a little bit? Is everybody okay with that? Okay, please, you may continue.
Yeah. The dairy, the flow and effect of dairy is immense with the factories in this area. So the AGM for the Murray-Darling Association is currently going to be held in Shepparton this year, early November. There'll be approximately 300 delegates from around Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, South Australia and the ACT coming to this very venue, basically, and hopefully we can get some movement on their position, which is then nationally accepted. We're just working as an area with the GMID, but this is a national organisation. Hopefully we can get some action on this 450, so the whole Murray-Darling Basin Association will have the same attitude towards it as we do. That is the plan.
Thank you very much, Councillor Patterson. Councillor Adam, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. As Councillor Patterson said, this is, what can I say, this is an issue that's been going on for many years. The 450 gigalitre up order has been spoken about for many years, and here we are still discussing it again. But this motion, this recommendation at least puts us on a different platform, I think. It's a more structured platform in our position and our opinions on the way forward. Up until this point, I really felt that all we were doing was shuffling the deck chairs in this whole discussion. It was sinking, going down the tubes, basically. This may not guarantee the outcome we want, but we've got to keep pushing and talking about it and advocating, and if this doesn't work, well, we have to go to a different level in respect to community advocacy, but it's so important. It underpins the whole economy of this region. And I think it's especially relevant at this point in time. We've got this COVID-19. Everything seems to go back to that, unfortunately, but our region, relative to all the other regions, is still performing fairly well because of the fact that we are reliant on our agricultural base. And without water, we wouldn't be in this position that we are today. That's how important this is, not just at this current time, but As Dennis said, we mentioned the report says the dairy regions declined 20%. Well, I believe that's more than that, but even 20%, we try and talk about improving and expanding these agricultural pursuits, not actually bringing them back by 20%. I mean, that's, as I said, I really felt this was going nowhere. I'm hoping this gives me a bit more of a bit more confidence moving forward, but I'm still not that confident. But at least it's a move in the right direction.
Thank you, Councillor Adam. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Summer?
Yeah, it's not necessarily against the motion per se, because I 100% agree with what's been put, and I do appreciate the work that's gone into it. It's just that there's been no public consultation. So even the report that came back to councillors was for noting only and not for discussion. I did try to push the point for discussion, but was shot down on that one. Look, water is important to all of us in our regional municipality, and I'm sure that our farmers would want to say on what our official position will be. Not consulting is a lost opportunity to involve people, educate people, and empower residents and the agricultural community for change to be mobilised with everyone on board, not just us being a squeaky wheel, but having a philosophy that goes a bit further. So we've just passed a consultation report showing that people want to be involved with the development of ideas. So in my opinion, I think we need to put it out and invite the public for comment, because we don't know it all. The smartest person in the room is everybody coming together, not one or two people forming a position and then using the top-down approach to make it happen. I agree with it, but that's not the point. It shouldn't be about our individual wants. This should be over-encompassing philosophy that the majority of people can get on board with.
Thank you, Councillor Summer. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? For the motion, I mean. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Councillor Patterson, would you like to use your right of reply?
No,
Okay. We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. Next is item 10.6, adoption of the Greater Shepparton Affordable Housing Strategy, Houses for People 2020. There's a recommendation on page 107. Could a councillor please move a motion?
I'd like
Councillor
to move that
O'Keefe.
motion. Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. I'd like to move the recommendation that the Council adopt the Greater Shepparton Affordable Housing Strategy, Houses for People 2020.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Horesvari. Thank you. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you very much, Madam Mayor. This has been a fairly lengthy project. I'll call it a project, clearly identifying, Greater Shepparton as Victoria's regional city with the highest level of homelessness. We know that we don't have enough homes for people within our region, and we need to be doing more, and this is what this document represents. There's a lot of other contribution that's gone into this document, so it's really important that we collaborate and work with obviously the state government, Beyond Housing and other organisations that are going to help us lead the way. As council, I think it's really important that we look at, what the future is as far as opportunity to get land developers to look at more affordable housing, social housing that is appropriate for the needs of our community. It's something that's lacking, it's something we need to be doing, and this document outlines perhaps the process that we'll need to do that. So I'm really happy to see this document. As you know, I'm very passionate about supporting the homeless people within our community. Homelessness is, it's very broad, it's very complex, but we have to constantly be working on it, and we have to be constantly looking after the people within our community that are very vulnerable, and it concerns me greatly at the moment with the COVID-19 in regard to homeless people. So very happy to see this document in place, a lot of work to be done and a lot of advocacy to happen to really make a difference within our community.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Horesvari, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Madam Mayor.
Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? So we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? The motion carried unopposed. Next is item number 10.7, Major and Minor Events Grants Program, Round 2, 2019-2020. There's a recommendation on page 112 and page 113, I think. So, and also on, oh, that's a long one. It's up until page 1. Okay. Get this one right. So it starts from page number
Just on page
112. Yeah, that's a mixed up. Thank you. So there's a recommendation on page 112. Would a councillor like to move a motion, please?
Madam Mayor, I'll move the recommendation as printed on page 112.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelman. Is there a seconder? Do I have a seconder, please? Councillor O'Keefe, thank you. Councillor Hazelman, would you
Thank
like
you.
to speak to the motion?
I think I'm only going to be repeating the comments made about some of the previous grant
that's right.
applications. Look, I do note the number of different cultural groups here that are taking advantage of and applying for these grants, and they're very significant events in those communities. Yes, in the present climate, events celebrating various Independence Days and other welcoming type events are going to be incredibly difficult, and they're probably going to be put on hold for quite some time. But it's very positive and very pleasing to see those groups attempting to be joining in with a broader part of the community. There's a range of diverse groups there that are applying for everything from radio flyers, Know Your Roots, the Shepparton Swimming Club. I think it's fantastic, and all of these grants programs, they're a relatively small amount of money in the terms of our budget, but they're a significant amount of money in terms of each of these groups. So I think it's a fantastic grants program, and hope that all of these groups ultimately get their projects underway.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelman. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thanks, Madam Mayor. I think Councillor Hazelman covered it well. Thank you.
Thank you. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Councillor Patterson.
Just quickly, and Councillor Hazen did summarise, but unfortunately already there's 3 that's been postponed and 1 cancelled. I'm sure Council will continue on the association with those groups, and when they can get themselves reorganised, we'll be still supporting them. They're an important part of our community, and we've got to do it. Very important for us to do it as well as it is for them.
Thank you, Councillor Patterson. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? Okay, we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Next is item 10.8, car parking in the Shepparton CBD. There's a recommendation on page 128. Would any councillor like to move a motion, please? Councillor Summer, what's your motion?
I would like to move the motion as printed on page, well, the recommendation as printed on page 128. Should I read it out, do you think? A bit long.
I think it's a bit long, so
Okay.
thank you. Do I have a seconder?
I'm happy to second that.
Councillor Keefe. Thank you. Councillor Summer, would you like to speak to the motion?
Yeah, I'm excited that this has come up. It's highly unlikely any of us are going to agree 100% on what's presented and the ways in moving forward. Parking has been a contentious issue for as long as I can remember. But I've always maintained that off-street parking should be incentivised and on-street parking should be decentivised. It stops congestion from people circling the block and frees up prime parking spots in the main street. Demand for free off-street parks was proven when we made the Nixon Street parking bay free and untimed. That bay was empty and now it's full. I don't particularly care if employees park there. The fact is that those cars no longer clog spots in front of shops. The Nixon Street initiative also demonstrated that people will walk. They even walk at Riverside and Marketplace, which do not have roads going in between their shops. All their car parks are technically off-street, which enhances the shopping experience, so it makes good business sense. And there will always be people who prefer to shop at department stores, but there are different styles of shoppers. A more relaxed CBD will activate the street in a different way. It'll draw people who enjoy socialising outdoors, people who linger longer at shop windows, and who are more prone to impulse buying. These people will be lured by less traffic, less noisy crowds, and a slower vibe. And if we succeed in that, we'll have a healthier, happier residential population and a thriving small business economy in the heart of our town like it used to be. If it does not reach our expectations, we can offer other incentives and disincentives. This could be the start of staging a smarter and more responsible approach to parking. Opening up free parking everywhere. I'm not necessarily against free parking, but we need to be responsible. We still need to manage traffic movements in our growing city centre, and I don't think blanket free parking does that. So to me, it's a very simple strategy. It makes good common sense, and I think we'd be mad not to follow through with it. But having had so many discussions, I'm sure this will be a great debate, so I look forward to it.
Thank you, Councillor Summer. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. And look, I think at the moment with the uncertainty that we're all feeling, and particularly the business community, I think offering off-street free parking is a start, and I certainly agree with Councillor Summer. I'm hoping this will be a staged process. I certainly, I probably don't 100% agree with the off-street. I probably would have preferred on-street free parking. To me, it's a more turnover of people coming and going. However, as I said, I'm looking at this as it's a start, and we're going to be able to offer some free car parking. I think it's really important that we get the locations of those car parks out. I was talking to a lady just a couple of days ago in regard to where they are located, and there was some surprise about the amount of car parks that are actually off-street car parks that we'll be offering for free parking. So it is coming in the recovery phase. I think that's an important thing to note. So, you know, when that will be, we're not sure. But I think it's a good first step, and I think it's a step in the right direction. But I am very, very concerned about our business community, the CBD, and you know, I think this is a good start.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Okay. All right. Would any councillor like to speak for the motion?
Yes, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Hazelman.
Yeah, look, I think it is a start in the sense that the debate about car parking has been around since forever, and we're never going to get agreement in the community on what's the best outcome. Clearly, a rapid move towards total free car parking is a very significant hit to the council budget, and realistically couldn't be achieved in any one single year. And this is, in my view, almost a bit of a compromise approach that what is financially affordable over a 12-month period. So I think it's, you know, you can argue about off-street, on-street. This is a pragmatic approach in that we can afford the 250,000, although that's going to be addressed. That shortfall will be addressed in the budget to be considered next week, and no doubt, as always there is in cases of council budgets, there'll probably be submissions in respect of that 250 and how we intend to find it. I think it's also worth noting here that the changes to the current car parking regime were implemented at a suitable time as part of the recovery phase. That's always going to be also contentious, that some people will say, you know, when the Premier ultimately makes some decisions and that we move into a different stage, is it now or is it in a month's time or whatever? That'll be a difficult one for council as well, because we'll have to determine when this change is physically going to occur. And no doubt there will be differences of opinion amongst the traders, amongst the chamber, and within the council itself about what is the appropriate timing of it. But it's important, though, that whatever message goes out from this meeting, that people are clearly understanding that this is a change that will occur at some point in the future.
Thank you, Councillor Hazelman. Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Sutton.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Since my election to council in 2016, I have continued to advocate for the free time parking in the CBD of Shepparton. So I welcome this change and this recommendation to actually begin to provide some free parking. I still would like to see us have free on-street parking in the future, and I wouldn't like to see that just go out the window now. I just think that we do need something that's some time parking that's free, and I think at the moment with the council-owned car parks, that's a start, but I wouldn't like to see that as a finish. I would like to see on-street car parking become free and timed in the future, and I think by doing it in a staged way, we'll be able to budget for it and it will happen in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Sutton. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? Councillor Asvari.
Thank you for the opportunity, Madam Mayor. Look, I share the same positive view that other councillors here have said, and it's been around since Adam was a boy, this whole business with free parking, time parking, you name it. We've had every different concoction. I think it's a great idea because it actually gives some sort of direction, but again, I'd share the same view that I'd hate to see this be considered as a titbit to sort of allay the people that have been beating the drum for so long in relation to the free parking. I think it's a step. The other aspect that I note is that in relation to the $250,000, where that is going to come from in terms of the budget, that's another battle to be fought in relation to the budget discussions that we'll have going forward. Thank you.
Councillor Asvari. Would any other councillor like to speak to the motion? We'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? I wasn't sure which way you are going to go up, so is it
Nor
in
was
favour?
I, actually, but
It's
there
in
you go.
favour, okay. And yeah, so that means motion carried unopposed. Thank you.
Remarkable.
Shocked.
Yeah, there you go.
Moving on to next item, 11.1. Councillors' Community Interaction and Briefing Program. There is a recommendation on page 148. Would any councillor like to move a motion, please?
I'm happy to move that.
Councillor O'Keefe.
Recommendation that the summary of the Council's Community Interaction and Briefing Program be received and recorded at assemblies of the councillors be noted.
Thank you, Councillor O'Keefe. Do I have a second?
I'll second the motion, Madam Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Adam. Councillor O'Keefe, would you like to speak to the motion?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I think like all councillors, things have come to a fairly quick halt. So it's been a change for us all, but it's great, to be still connected to community. I think it's really important for the community to connect to us as well. We're still here. We're still, very active, so it's a change for us all. But I think personally I'm missing a lot of the community events and the interaction with my community, keeping myself busy with a few volunteering roles to keep myself out in the community. But yeah, I'm sure things, when they do get back to normal, the community will all come together again. We're all in it together, and I'm looking forward to definitely coming together with my community and getting things back to normal as soon as we can. I'm sure that list will be shorter next month.
That list will be non-existent next month.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much, Councillor O'Keefe. Councillor Adam, would you like to speak to the motion?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak for the motion? Okay, we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Okay. Next, page number 150, which is missing in the printed agenda and the one that is on website, but it's displayed here. And you all have got copies of that?
Yes, we've got it.
Okay, item number 12, urgent businesses not included on the agenda. Councillors, are there any other urgent businesses? Nil? 13 is confidential management reports. 13.1, designation of confidentiality of information report attachments. There is a recommendation on page 150. Would any councillor like to move a motion, please? Councillor Adam?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll move the recommendation, 13.1, on page 150. I won't read it out. It's just a procedural sort of thing.
Okay, thank you. And a seconder, please. Councillor Hazelman. Councillor Adam, would you like to speak to the motion?
No.
Okay, and Councillor Hazelman?
No, Madam Mayor.
Would any councillor like to speak against the motion? Would any councillor like to speak to the motion? Okay, we'll now go to the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried unopposed. Thank you. So with that, I'll declare this meeting closed at 7:14. Thanks all. Stay safe and stay healthy, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor.